IBM is one of those companies that I think most people think they know, but probably very few do.
Dave, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
We've been in Australia for about 93 years. I mean, IBM itself is about 114 years old. It's kind of an unlikely hero for something as cutting edge as AI. Maybe you've seen a typewriter or a laptop computer branded as IBM. It's a brand that you could easily consider as something of the past and not actually have a current view around what the business is really doing and what it stands for. More AI and generative AI patents than anybody else in the world, more than say Microsoft plus OpenAI combined. With any technology, we tend to overestimate the short-term impact, but I think we consistently underestimate the long-term impact. There's just huge upside. Who's going to make a buck out of AI? This is extraordinary. I mean, what a time to be alive.
Dave, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
A pleasure to be here.
Been really looking forward to this conversation today. We're going to be talking about the hot topic of the moment. We're going to be talking about AI, how to think about it, how to implement it, what can happen within companies as they go on that journey. And obviously, to have you as a absolute market leading expert on the topic, really looking forward to it.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I really appreciate the invitation.
Fantastic. So before we get stuck into the good stuff, I'd just like to ask you a few questions about IBM. Obviously, one of the most iconic businesses and brands in the world. So let's start there. What's the legacy of IBM in Australia?
So, well, we've been in Australia for about 93 years. I mean, IBM itself is about 114 years old. And so Australia was one of the early countries. In fact, it was interesting. I was with a client yesterday and the client was Westpac, and we've been serving that particular client for 90 years. It's just extraordinary that that we've been going strong for so long. And I suppose in that context, such a venerable institution, I suppose, is kind of an unlikely hero for something as cutting edge as AI. And I think that's one of the really interesting, maybe quirky things about the IBM story at the moment.
Absolutely. And IBM itself, I think it sets quite a nice tone for this conversation as well. Just globally, the business has also been sort of undergoing a transformation, hasn't it? Can you just walk us through what's been happening at the global level with IBM, and then we'll start to zero in on Australia? I mean,
again, IBM is one of those companies that I think most people think they know, but probably very few do. I mean, I was trying to think of an analogy for this. Maybe a good one will be Coca-Cola, right? We all know Coca-Cola, right? We all have consumed their products. We've all got a very clear idea of what that brand is and what it stands for. But Coca-Cola isn't just about, the Coke brand. They do protein drinks, they do energy drinks, they own Costa Coffee, they make tea, they're one of the largest water companies in the world, but we think we know them because they've just been around for such a long time. Well, IBM's a bit like that. IBM is something that many of us would have come across. Maybe, if you're as old as me, maybe you've seen a typewriter or a laptop computer branded as IBM. And so you might have seen, IBM logos in movies with mainframes, war games and things. And so it's a brand that you could easily, consider as something of the past and not actually have a current view around what the business is really, what it really is doing and what it stands for in the modern age. And so, I've been with this business about 18 months. It's been a learning journey for me to get my head around what this business really is in 2025. But really the big change for us happened 2020, 2021, when IBM reinvented itself, and it termed itself as a hybrid cloud and AI business. And I think that's kind of a brave call. If you think back to kind of 2021, 2020, hybrid cloud, well, you've said, well, look, boys and girls, look, the answer is really public cloud. We see the growth of Azure, we see the growth of AWS. The future's public cloud. And AI, come on, IBM, you've been banging the drum about AI for 7 decades. Who's going to make a buck out of AI? And I think, a lot of people could have looked at that sort of statement and just thought it was kind of blah, blah, and not very sincere. But the business followed through. They exited. They'd exited, the infrastructure part of the business, which became Kyndryl, They bought Red Hat, fully embraced the open ecosystems of partnerships, massive contributors into open source, more AI and generative AI patents than anybody else in the world, more than say Microsoft plus OpenAI combined. And so it's really kind of gone full bore on this strategy, and it's really been paying off. So if you look at the share price performance, IBM's doubled in share value over the last couple of years or so. There's been a bit of movement within the last few days, but last time I looked, if you'd have compared the major tech businesses in terms of share price performance over the last year or so, you'd have seen Nvidia, you'd have seen IBM, and then you'd have seen other more famous names somewhat in our wake. So I think now there's a bit of an awakening, a bit of a realization that IBM is a real player, a very serious player in the AI game, and that's super exciting. But it does come, as you were saying, David, it comes from also the way that we've been applying these same technologies in our own business. So we've been embarking on this. There was the shift in strategy that I mentioned, but also the way that we implementing AI in our own business, drinking our own champagne, if you will, is a profound enabler of our transformation.
Just a little bit about yourself. Obviously, your background has primarily been in consulting, management consulting. Now you've kind of jumped over the fence, let's say, to now becoming the CEO. So talk to us, what's that transition been like, moving from the sort of consultancy side into the side of being the CEO?
Yeah, I mean, look, to be clear, Arvind Krishna is the CEO of IBM. Relatively speaking, I run a pretty small part of the family here. I lead the consulting business here in Australia. But what you say is true. It's been a shift. So I started in consulting. I did a couple of turnarounds. So I held management positions in a couple of turnarounds in the middle part of my career, and then went back into consulting. And actually, a lot of my clients were IT services businesses. So I've been working with clients that are somewhat similar to the business that I now lead, through change, through turnaround. And I think to a certain extent, I was getting a little bit frustrated in the sense that I felt that I knew what the answers were. I think it felt I knew how I would lead those businesses. But of course, as a consultant, as someone that advises, you have to respect the authority of the executives. You can provide advice and you can provide, the evidence to underpin that advice, but ultimately the executives have to make the call. And so when I got tapped on the shoulder about, coming across to IBM and leading this business, it's something that I jumped at. I knew instinctively it was the right thing to do. And, as I've got further and further into this, I've enjoyed it more. But it's definitely harder doing than advising. I will concede that. I've got a lot of patience for my clients, right? I have a foot in both camps here, that are juggling the day-to-day pressures of leading a business, quarterly earnings and other nearer term considerations, with the stewardship of the business, how you're guiding the organization through a time of tremendous change. So it's tremendous fun. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else at the moment. There are very many plates spinning. I often comment that there are more fires than hoses, and choosing where it is that you devote your time, energy, and effort is probably one of the most difficult things that any business leader needs to consider.
And you said before, IBM has essentially embraced AI in its own operations and business since 2018, which in today's world feels like a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time in dog years, isn't it?
What? Obviously, you've not been in your position all that time, so you didn't necessarily have the sort of view on it from a day-to-day basis. But what do you think's been perhaps the most meaningful transformation that's happened within your part of the business because of that early adoption of AI?
I think there's a couple actually. So, I mean, if you think about the way that AI gets applied in say, business like ours, but I think it's analogous for many of our clients' businesses as well. There's probably three fronts that you can think about applying AI within. So the first, and probably the easiest to address, is the back office, and that's where we started. So back in 2018, we started in HR, but we've applied that across all of the different back office areas. So HR, finance, procurement. These are places that a lot of organizations start. The savings are very, very real, and also, while there are risks, particularly when you're dealing with HR, you're dealing with people issues, policies, etc. These are known. These are manageable risks. So that's kind of front one. Front two becomes then with the customer, or perhaps one level behind the customer. So supporting people that are facing into them, so agents, perhaps giving them the tools, the understanding, next best action, those sorts of things. So building on some technologies that have existed for some time, but with AI, obviously, you can do that in a way that is much, much more sophisticated. And then, the natural extension of that would be to automate the self-service with AI, which has got slightly higher levels of risk for really obvious reasons. The third, which is probably having the most profound impact on IBM Consulting, is how we enable our people, however. And so if you think about the role of a consultant, the kind of things that we might do, and when I say consultant, by the way, we do advisory work, but we do IT services, we do outsourcing. It's quite a broad portfolio of professional services, technology professional services that we undertake. These are the kind of roles that can be enormously accelerated, enormously benefit from AI. And so in different parts of our business, we're seeing 50 to 80% productivity improvement with the tools that we're giving people. So what started in life within IBM as a little bit of a skunkworks project to provide AI tools to our people has accelerated to be a massive investment, hundreds of millions of dollars, in something called IBM Consulting Advantage. And so all of our people are provided with an array of AI tools. These are safe AI tools that we can use with our clients. This is where we keep essentially all of our IP so that it's readily available to all of our people. And there's a range of different models, agents that people can call upon in order to undertake their work in a way that is much, much more efficient than would have been possible. And so if you think about applying AI in all of those areas, in combination, that's had a massive impact on our business. So over the last 2 years, we've had an impact of about $3.5 billion in terms of the impact in IBM. And in terms of the work that we've been doing with clients, we've signed now, I think it's about $7.5 billion worth of generative AI related work with clients. So this is really impacting our business in terms of the way that we operate. But obviously, the learnings that we've garnered through doing this, we're obviously now translating at scale to an array of different clients.
Yeah, it's very impressive figures there. And when you say you've seen productivity gains from your own staff, I think you said 50 to 80%. What has that meant for those staff members in terms of how they can now operate? Does that mean they have 50 to 80% more time? Does it mean the work they do is more valuable? How do we understand that?
Yeah, so the way that AI impacts the workforce, I think, varies quite a lot on the basis of the context. So for our people that are doing consulting work or IT services work for clients, there's just huge upside. So if we think, why would a client not invest in a particular technology, say? Usually, if you're looking for productivity gains, you're looking for growth, you're looking for cost out within an organization, you may need to invest. Obviously, you need to get the business case to fly. Now, what we're finding is, obviously, as we can do so much more with the people that we've got, that means that that helps to deliver a much better business case for our clients. So what that means is that they can actually afford to do more with technology. More of the projects that they might want to undertake are going to be able to be delivered within the timeframes available or within the cost envelopes that are available, and can deliver better outcomes for their businesses. So I think on that side of the business, it's very elastic. The fact that we can do more with essentially less time, energy, and effort input, just the dividends on that are very, very clear. I think that the harder side of the equation is when we're looking at work that needs to be done, and it can be delivered much more effectively with AI, and where we're creating capacity that is not necessarily fully consumed. And so where we've applied AI in, say, some of the back office functions, absolutely, it's freed up a lot of capacity to be doing higher value activities. So, no more having to spend lots of time doing, HR process type activities, because those are actually executed by agents. But actually, there's a whole bunch of strategic questions that we have in HR around how we evolve our workforce for the AI age that we need to do. At the same time, though, we are freeing up capacity there, and the mix is shifting between what's the capacity that we need in the back office versus the front office. So we're having to think about how we retrain people and give people opportunities to move from, say, what they're doing today to being able to be serving clients and have relevant skills going forward. And that, I think, is a challenge that we're facing into. But I think that's one of the big challenges around AI that all of us should be thinking about.
Yeah, the retraining part's pretty key, isn't it? 'Cause I feel like a lot of focus gets put on what we can save and how much time we can save. But then if you're not going to reuse or reinvest that time wisely, then the whole exercise is not going to be as valuable as it could have been.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. But I don't think it's just a question of value here. I think there's a question here of responsibility. So, one of the things that I'm personally very passionate about is making sure that as we drive this wave of AI through our businesses, that we do so as leaders in a way that is genuinely responsible. And there's a bunch of things that we focus on, obviously, when we talk about responsible AI. But I think the one that is most pressing is around how people are treated, and how we think about. We invest obviously in giving people the skills and the capabilities to be as productive as they possibly can with all of these AI tools. But for those people whose roles are being disrupted, and let's be honest, there are roles that are clearly being lost because of AI. They're being substituted. How do we then ensure that they've got the learning pathways in order to retrain, to be able to reapply their talents in different areas? So I was chatting actually the other morning with one of our colleagues who started, or when I joined the business, was working in HR. Her role has gone away, but actually through the experiences that she's had in applying AI in her area, she's invested very considerably in her skills and capabilities. She's now a consultant in our business, and she's helping other organizations to apply AI. Apply AI in their businesses. I think that's a great example of someone that's understood the potential of technology, understood how this might be, have negative consequences for them if they're not really proactive, taking control of their careers. And obviously on our side, we've needed to make sure that she's got the understanding, the guidance, has got the training available, and that we can help to transition into a very different role. So I think these are the sorts of interventions that we're always going to make, and I will concede that that's probably one of the better examples that we've got. But I think that's the kind of thing that we need to promote, to champion, and see if we can replicate as much as possible.
The HR examples are an interesting one. We actually had a guest on the show not so long ago, kind of leading HR expert. One thing he was saying, which really sort of stuck with me, was AI will give people more time to spend thinking about other people and working with doing people related activities. And the example you gave is exactly right. So those HR processes perhaps disappear, but then those same HR staff can now actually focus on doing the people to people activities instead.
Yeah, look, you couldn't be more right. So, I mean, our business now, 94% of interactions with HR are via essentially a chat interface, and the number of transactions that takes place, I think it's about 2 million interactions, and then about 1.1 million of those are transactions, in the sense that this isn't just, tell me something. It's not just a query. It's actually, I need you to do something, and it actually does the thing. So what that means for me, for example, if I need to change someone's reporting line, I go into a chatbot and I say that I need to change, Bill's reporting line, and Bill now needs to report into Janet, and it will do that. I no longer have to go into, the actual application success factors in our business to go and do that. An agent will do that for me, and it will just tell me that it's done. And so, somebody in my role, perhaps in days gone by, wouldn't have gone into the system themselves. They'd probably had their HR manager go and do that for them. And so I think that the way that we kind of enable people to do that and take away those lower level activities, because the machines can do that, I think is a great opportunity. And so I think, that is definitely something to be celebrated, and that's something that we need to take advantage of.
And how has your role in particular, and the role of a CEO, how has that changed for you now that you have access to these sort of real state of the art AI tools? I'm just trying to give those execs kind of listening at the moment, who are obviously not as far along on the journey as you would be. What's been the impact on the way you go about your day to day?
So in terms of my day to day, I think, like a lot of other leaders, I try and use as many of these tools as I possibly can. Like everybody else in our business, I've got access to IBM Consulting Advantage. If I need to structure a presentation, if I need to do any level of kind of problem solving, then there's stuff there that I can obviously use. We obviously use lots of other applications as well. We use SAP, we use Salesforce. There's AI capabilities embedded into all of those things, and we're not precious about, say, only using IBM stuff. I also try and make a point of using as many of the other public domain tools. I mean, I will obviously not use it for kind of sensitive information, but just being familiar as possible and trying things out, Claude or Perplexity or whatever it happens to be. Can you help me with this particular task, this research, this understanding, building a very quick body of knowledge that I can start to work through and apply. I think we need to push ourselves to take advantage of all of these tools that are at our disposal. I think the way that it affects me, though, most broadly, is just trying to peer around corners. So there's a day-to-day aspect, but this is a period of profound change. And so thinking about how this is going to impact, what are the opportunities for our clients? What are the opportunities for our own people around this? And how do we start to equip people? I think that's one of the really important responsibilities of people in roles like these. And if I may reflect, I feel very lucky to have been through what are essentially two major revolutions in my career. So when I started my career, that was the internet was just becoming mainstream. I sent my first email when I was at university. I had my first mobile phone in my first year of my job, and now we're obviously going through this profound impact around AI, and I think it's wonderful to have lived through these two massive changes. But I think the change here in this transition around AI is more profound. So when we think about what happened with the internet, okay, there were bricks and mortars businesses that were definitely disrupted. Your local bookstore, for example, but the level of disruption, I would say, was massively overshadowed by the growth and the opportunities that were created. Now, I fundamentally believe that that'll also be the case with AI, but the rate of change, the pace of change, and the breadth of the storm front, the breadth of the impact that it potentially has is extremely wide. And so I think we need to give care to ensuring that the impacts of AI on our society, on our businesses, are really thought through. I'm a massive proponent of AI and enabling businesses to use this at scale, but I do think we need to be thoughtful, particularly in businesses like mine, largely a people-based business, around how we manage the people the people impacts.
Yeah, it's challenging, isn't it? Because as execs, we have so much responsibility actually in the way that AI is going to be implemented and the impact that it's going to have on people individually, businesses, communities. And it doesn't feel like kind of government and regulators are going to sort of keep up in terms of policing. And a lot of decisions are going to get made now and have to be made by those execs. And ultimately, it's how do you make those in the interest of business, but also responsibly, like you've said.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm obviously coming to you from Australia. There's a very live debate in Australia at the moment around productivity. So productivity within the Australian economy has really flatlined over many years, and the government is embarking on a consultation process essentially to try and draw in, the contest of ideas. How can Australia be more productive? And of course, AI is a massive topic within this. And how do we encourage the growth of AI? And we've seen some really great investments from the likes of Amazon. There's various others that are looking for opportunities to make investments here in Australia, which is fantastic. We'll absolutely welcome that. But one of the topics, of course, is, well, how are you going to govern? How are you going to regulate AI? And obviously, there's been a similar debate in the US, and we've seen obviously the winds of change in US regulation on this very topic. I think the way that we would see it within IBM is that we're not going to wait for regulation. I mean, we will abide by whatever regulatory regimes are instantiated in the jurisdictions in which we operate. But I would say that, for us, we have 4 core beliefs around AI. It needs to be open, which is, available to all. We're real big contributors to the open ecosystem. We believe that it should be, very democratized. It's got to be trusted. So, ensuring that we, again, we've all seen the hallucinations. We've all seen, potential negative impacts. It needs to be targeted. We need to know exactly where it is that we're driving the value from when we apply AI. And it needs to be what we would say empowering. So it's not just about empowering the end users, but it's also the people that are actually working with with AI tools, giving them the capabilities to build and to innovate. And so if those are our overall principles, that core beliefs in terms of AI, particularly around this aspect of trusted, this is one where we've leaned into very, very strongly. So for probably about 5 years or so, we've had an global AI governance board, which has got decision-making authority and has actually made some tough calls in the past around, things that we can and can't do, markets that we would potentially exit, even within the AI domain, on the basis of what we think is the societal impact. So I think that organizations like ours, need to have, very clear, firm beliefs, but need to put guardrails in place. And I think, again, when I speak to many of our clients that are looking at scaling AI, I think there's reasonably wide awareness of this. And so, many of our clients are, rightly thoughtful, cautious, putting in the right sort of, guardrails themselves in their own organizations. Because if they're going to scale AI, yes, they need the individual use cases. They need to have the proof points of value, but they need to have all of the mechanisms in place that allow them to scale. And that's not just having a bunch of developers. That's actually having the sorts of management systems in place that can steer the innovation in a way that is both value-adding and safe.
And you need to properly implement these systems, you need your people to buy in. So if you're sort of implementing AI in a way that's, not particularly kind, and you're looking at it from a point of view of how many costs can we cut and how many people can we cut, kind of the remainder of the team are probably not going to be big supporters of bringing in, and ultimately then it isn't going to work. At some stage, you're going to need some people there who really buy into it.
Yeah, look, I think that's right. I mean, again, there's lots of different ways of cracking that nut, I'm sure. One of the things that we do every year is we have an internal challenge around AI. So we've just done it actually, or we're in the process of doing it. So I don't know how many people we're going to have participating this year, but last year I think it was just shy of 150,000 people in our business took part, and we call it the What's Next challenge. So What's Next is one of essentially our platform for AI, which includes all of our technology, but also technology from lots of other partner organizations or from open source ecosystems, so that you can build AI capabilities in an enterprise setting, for businesses. And so we set this challenge out there, go create. And it could be creating capabilities for our own business. It could be for specific client situations. It could be for non-for-profits. But what we've tried to do is get everybody on the tools and thinking about the application of this. In Australia, everybody in our business, top to bottom, has done AI training. And that's something that we're going to continue to do on a year-to-year basis, because I think it's non-discretionary that we familiarize ourselves, that we look for ways that we can, the ways that we can apply these technologies, for a wide array of benefits. Yes, there are clearly going to be cost, productivity, benefits on one side, but I think that's extraordinarily narrow if that's where we limit our thinking towards.
What are some of the big mistakes you've seen from execs and management teams that are doing their AI strategies and implementation plans?
Well, look, I think I'm not going to point the finger at anybody else. I'm going to actually refer to one of IBM's mistakes on this. And so I mentioned that we started our journey in 2018. So one of the ways that you can measure the impact, one of the ways that you can measure the performance of an HR team is through NPS, Net Promoter Score. And I might get the numbers slightly wrong here, but when we started down the journey of applying AI at scale, Ask HR is the brand that we use internally. Back in 2018, our NPS dropped. And it went from, I might get the numbers slightly wrong, but maybe it was 20 or 30, and it dropped to, about minus 20, minus 17, something like that. And of course, that is something that we learned from. Well, what happened? Well, we rolled out a whole bunch of tools. Here it is. And we took away a whole bunch of capability, and we didn't really give the full consideration to the change management. And this is a fundamental change in behavior. And so obviously we learned from that, and we improved the efficacy of the tools, we improved the training, we improved the change management. And actually people could see that it was a lot easier to get the work done through an agent, through a chat interface, than waiting on the phone, waiting for somebody to email me back. And as a consequence, we've turned the corner, and I think the NPS within our HR organization at the moment would be probably about 74, 75, something like that. And so that's the kind of mistake that we made. Now, obviously, what we try and do when we help our clients is we try and avoid those kind of mistakes. And it's one of the reasons why we've, across the range of fronts, we've tried to, as I said before, drink our own champagne. We call it Client Zero. So all of the things that we're applying to our clients, we've tried to apply to ourselves first. And so, yes, the things that we're going out to the market with, we talk about the $3.5 billion of benefits that we've driven within our own organization. But, peel under the cover, we're also identifying the stumbling blocks, the things that we tried that didn't quite work, particularly human factors such as change management. In fact, much more than the technology side of things.
Isn't that interesting that there's so much focus, and there will be so much focus on the technology, but probably in most cases, like you've said, the thing that may let people down is the It's the standard change management piece.
Well, look, exactly. And look, I think the change management piece is a really important one. I think the other one has just been around, following the value, right? So where can you actually apply these sorts of, tools, techniques? In our business, the way that we've thought about this, and I think I think this translates really well, is we thought about this not just in terms of we're going to apply some AI, but we thought about it in terms of, firstly, what can we eliminate? What are we actually doing today that we don't need to do? And you can imagine, right, 113, 114-year-old business. Yeah, there's a few things that we probably should have left behind. And so how can we just stop doing stuff? So thousands and thousands of reports that were created. No need. How many approvals, how many people need to approve in order to undertake a certain task? Again, I would say that we were probably way, way too bureaucratic in the past, and we've really sought to eliminate some of that. The second is then simplification. So actually, as you look at your end-to-end workflows, what's the happy path here? How can we make this just a better experience, which is generally a better experience for performers, people in our organization? It's a better experience for clients or for end customers. And so those are the two foundations. And then obviously you can bring in the automation. And I think that as we think about how we apply AI, it's very easy to get attracted to the flashing, blinking lights of the technology and, okay, well, here's something and we'll just try this and roll this out. But I think if we forget about the elimination, the simplification first, and we just try and deploy technology, I think we're going to be disappointed with some of the results.
I don't think that there's probably not many execs out there now who don't get the importance of technology, of AI, and they fully understand that they need to be thinking about it. Let's say I'm a client. I give you a call and I say, Dave, we're ready to start our AI journey. We know we need to do this. What's the first question you're going to ask me?
I think the first question I'm going to ask is probably, where are you up to? Because I think in this sort of journey, you've got to meet a client where they are. I mean, we've got some organizations that we work with that are incredibly sophisticated, that have been applying this technology, nearly as long as we have. And then we've got others that are brand new on the journey and recognize the potential, but maybe they're under pressure from their board. Maybe there's some other external factors that mean now's the time to begin to act. So I think, we've got to really understand where they are. We're going to meet clients where they are. I think in terms of, as we think about embarking on this road, there really is a question in my mind around how it is that we can drive, a level of maturity before scale. So how can we start to get some quick wins? How can we start to build a little bit of belief, a little bit of momentum, and actually learn? I mean, these are new skills for a lot of people. And so getting familiar with that, getting some positive feedback, a bit of affirmation, this is actually working. We're seeing how we could do that. But then essentially also at the same time, starting to think about how do we put some of the foundational enablers in place for us to be able to scale. So I talked about governance before. A big one, of course, is data, right? The data is the fuel of AI. So how do we get our data in order so that we can actually apply that in our various AI use cases? So these are some of the things that we would tend to begin to discuss with our clients.
I worry sometimes that executives, founders, management teams are panicking a little bit in terms of they're worried that if they don't adopt the next big thing in AI, they're gonna come to work tomorrow and their competitors just left them in the dust, and perhaps people are trying to move perhaps too quickly, almost before, like you said, just establishing those foundations.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's interesting, right? With any technology, with any new innovation, actually, we tend to overestimate the short-term impact. We imagine that suddenly, we're going to wake up and the world is going to be fundamentally different. But I think we consistently underestimate the long-term impact. And so, if we cast our minds back to the early days of the internet, and well, maybe you're too young for this, but you know, I got caught up in the kind of the dot-com boom and the era, and we imagined that the world was going to suddenly be completely different, and obviously we kind of went through some major resetting of expectations through the 2000s. But you look at the impact that these sorts of technologies have had on the world. It's absolutely profound. We could not possibly envisaged all of the ways that being hyper connected has changed our world. I'm sure the case is the same with AI. So I think there is time. There is time for businesses to get their arms around this and to react. I mean, one stat that I think is kind of interesting, actually, that I heard quite recently is when we think about the large language models, the famous ones, like the consumer grade ones that we all use at home. These have been trained with pretty much everything that is in the public domain. And so the information that's in the public domain, almost all of it is being used in some way, shape, or form to train large language models. The same is not true for enterprise data. So a lot less than 1% of enterprise data has been used to train models. Now, obviously, we don't want to be training public domain models with your business proprietary data, but you can train your own models. And so we're really only beginning to get our arms around this and to think about how we use AI in an enterprise way, in a way that's enterprise grade, that is secure, that is safe, that is built for your business. I mean, we used the HR example. We used 9 different LLMs in HR, and each of those are obviously trained specifically with our data. They're based on open source. They're based on open source models that have been instructed with our IBM data, but that's an outlier, right? There's not a lot of that yet. So I think we're really at the beginning of the journey. When 1% becomes 50%, well, maybe we'll have a very, very different view. But I think there's still opportunities. There's still time for businesses to get their arms around AI and to apply this at scale. But the clock's ticking, and there's a learning curve. We've seen this in our own business. You've got to get on that learning curve, and you've got to get, as I say, to a level of maturity before you can get to a level of scale.
Yeah, well said. One thing you mentioned to me when we spoke previously that you were sort of quite passionate about and felt that discussion needed to be had was kind of the career paths and the future of those young people, those people joining the workforce, and what this revolution may or may not do to sort of their career prospects. Just talk to us a little bit about what you see there in terms of the future of work, particularly for those people sort of joining the workforce.
Yeah, so look, I think this is a really healthy debate for us to have, and I credit Dario Amodi from CEO of Anthropic for kind of really pushing this into the public consciousness of a few months back. He very famously said that he thought that 50% of entry-level jobs were going to be displaced by AI. And of course, if you look across, again, if you reflect on, again, we're slightly different vintages here, David, but if I think about the kind of work that I used to do as an entry-level consultant, I might be, restructuring a document. I might be doing some primary research. I might be doing a bunch of relatively low-level tasks. If I'd entered into law, I might have been, dealing with making changes on a red line document. I might have been doing some pretty low-level activities. If I'd gone into accounting, I might have been debugging code if I'd gone down that path. All of those activities can be performed extraordinarily well with an array of AI models today. And so I think that Dario's comment, needs to be taken seriously. But I would venture that there's 2 schools of thought. Either you can subscribe to the view that well, we simply don't need those roles, and what we'll do is we'll just train people that are maybe 3, 5, 7 years into their career, 10 years, who knows, and they'll just have their various AI agents. They'll have their various go-to models that will perform all of the tasks that used to be performed by a pyramid of people under them. There's another school of thought which says actually we have people entering the workforce that have perhaps been using AI longer than many others. Maybe they've been using it through their studies. Maybe they've just got a deeper affinity to it, as often happens with technology changes. But we can skill them, we can equip them, we can give them the confidence to be much more effective than you or I might have been at the beginning of our careers, and actually achieve much more than would be possible for someone that's 5 or 7 years into their career because of this enablement, because of all of these tools and capabilities that are at their fingertips. And of course, I've painted two extreme pictures, and the truth will probably be somewhere in the middle. But I think that as leaders, we can't afford to leave a generation behind. We can't afford the former to be the full picture. And look, I will declare a bias here. Two of my daughters are 17 and 18 years old, right? So they are, one of them's just started university, one of them is about to finish high school. So this feels very real for me in my family life as well as my work life. But I think that we've got an obligation to make sure that not only we feel an obligation to make sure that we are creating the opportunities for our younger people entering the workforce now in order to be successful, to be able to enjoy the careers that we enjoyed. And I actually think that there's a question, even if you're not altruistically minded, there is a question of stewardship here. We need to be building these businesses for generations to come. As I said, IBM's more than 100 years old. I've got very great confidence that this business will outlive me. And so, on that assumption, we need to be bringing in this talent. We need to be giving them, great experiences, learning, having the opportunity to drive impact. And I think that needs to be done very intentionally. So, for example, we're increasing, not decreasing, the number of graduate hires that we're making here in Australia. We're leaning into the training and development. So yes, we're investing very heavily in AI, but we're investing very heavily in our learning and development. I personally am leading some of the training courses. That's the case with some of our other senior leaders as well, because we want to make sure that this is seen as being a real priority, and that we're actually going to give all of our people that are at every level within our organization the opportunity to flourish and shine in this incredibly exciting era, right? Again, I think in this conversation we maybe dwelt a little bit on the negatives here. I mean, this is extraordinary. I mean, what a time to be alive. The things that we will be able to do here, but we just need to make sure that we're doing that in a way that really takes our people with us, or, I think we're going to look back and reflect that we weren't good enough stewards of these sorts of businesses.
It's interesting. We were recording an episode just yesterday with the CEO of a very well-known health and wellness brand there in Australia. And he was talking about the importance of interns to his business, about bringing them in and like using their creativity and their ways of thinking to kind of challenge what they were doing. And I said to him at the time, I was like, you're probably the first CEO of a company of this size that's mentioned the importance of interns before. It was really interesting. I think of it as well a bit like when you look at great sports teams, of course they had their star players, they had their experienced players, the people who've been there and done it. But usually there's just that like smattering of those one or two very young players who come in and they just bring that slightly different mentality, that sometimes that naivety, that willingness to do things that others wouldn't do is actually what can make the difference.
Look, I think that's really insightful. I mean, we're very heavily involved in those sorts of programs as well. So we've got partnerships with a number of universities here in Australia. In fact, I was with one of them over in Western Australia earlier on this week. We had a joint strategic planning session together to determine how we're going to develop. This is Edith Cowan University. How we're going to together develop the talent and the capabilities in that part of the world in Western Australia. And for the past few years, we've had what's called IBM Future Lab, which is actually based on the university campus. We've give opportunities for people to earn and learn. So about more than 40% of the people at that university are first in family to go to their university. And many of them are drawn from across regional Australia. And so they're living on campus, and that's expensive. So, you need to have a job. And so we've created a delivery center on the campus so people can be, studying and also spend a few hours with us at IBM working on our business or working on our clients' problems. And that's obviously a path to then enter into the business. And this is something that we do in a few parts a few different centers in the country. I think it's of tremendous value. And I have to say, some of my best days in the office are when I'm in either Ballarat or in Joondalup. In these delivery centers, speaking with people, many of them interns, just the energy, the ideas, the creativity. And hey, look, some of the things that I recognize some of the mistakes that they might make as being similar to those that I would have made. But again, if you're in an environment where there's the coaching, there's the apprenticeship, there's the constant learning, there's the curiosity, iterate so quickly. And obviously, again, with the tools and the capabilities that are available to people now, I'm amazed at the quality of the work that they're able to deliver. It's absolutely phenomenal. So I'm an absolute believer in young professionals. And as I say, I don't subscribe to the Dario view of the world. I think that we can do better than that. But I think it needs to be very intentional.
And also just as leaders, one of the greatest pleasures is passing on knowledge, right, and coaching. So I think it's always something people should do, even if it's just something that kind of fills up their cup.
Look, I couldn't agree more. In fact, yesterday happened to be just coincidentally a very, very proud day for me personally. So somebody that I worked with for many years, he was on my teams across 2 different organizations, 3 different countries. And then he's gone on and had a stellar career. He was just appointed as the CEO of Air New Zealand yesterday, a guy called Nikhil Ravishankar, total superstar. And it's just wonderful to have played a part in journey of somebody that has just got huge potential, and to be able to celebrate somebody else's victory as loudly and proudly as I would anything that I would achieve. I think those are wonderful moments when we can think, well, okay, we've given something back, and we've helped somebody on their journey. Again, I'm sure you've got many examples personally that you can think of, but I think that's one of the real joys of any kind of leadership position, is to be able to identify, to nurture talent, and to be able to provide a little bit of the tailwinds that are sometimes needed. I think Nikhil would have achieved everything he's achieved without me, by the way. But if there's a fraction of 1% that I've contributed there, well, I'll sleep easy at night.
Yeah, and going back to, like you said, making sure that the conversation around AI is positive as it should be. If you apply what we're talking about here in terms of coaching people and giving them the best opportunity to succeed, I mean, AI just, I mean, what that means we can do for people and what they can achieve is just crazy.
Look, again, I couldn't agree more. Right, so I think, and again, I think we're really only scratching the surface here. And so, we'll look back on this era in the way that we might look back on the era of dial-up internet. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And I think that when we properly unleash all of the creative elements that are available to us. So we talk a lot about agentic AI. Agents are obviously powerful things. You can get an AI to do a thing. Obviously, many of the tasks that we perform today are complex. You do many things, and so you need to orchestrate a number of different agents to perform tasks. I mean, what we're doing in our business, of course, is we're doing all of this work, but we're harvesting all of this IP and we're making it available to all of our people. So now there's a library of agents. I don't necessarily need to create them in the same way as I might be able to draw down on, code modules I might be able to download if I'm a coder. And so now, what I'm thinking about is, well, here's this business problem. I can now break it down. There's these different tasks. There's all of these different AI agents that I might have at my disposal. My ability to develop new ones, to build new ones, is obviously itself massively enabled by AI. So there's a flywheel. There's a positive feedback aspect to this, and so we're still in the relatively early days of agentic AI, but I think that this is a key thing that we need to unleash in our businesses in the years ahead. I think that's just super exciting. And I think about all the things that I do in my day-to-day job that frankly I don't want to do. And the first thing that occurs to me when I'm performing some process related tasks, and I still do, is there's got to be an agent that can do this. There's got to be a better way. And I think if we're all asking that question, we're all kind of leaning into that. Okay, so how can we create that? How can we make that true? And then what do we learn from that we can then apply to different situations? I think it's enormous privilege to be in business, at a time when we can actually lean into these things and actually drive value in this way. And look, I will concede, I'm an engineer by training. I'm a bit of a geek. I love this stuff, right? It's just so great to be able to solve problems, and to be able to solve problems in really smart, innovative ways that then equip you to solve even more complex problems. I mean, that's just terrific fun. I mean, it's great business, but it's just terrific fun.
Dave, you've been extremely generous with your time today. So I'm going to just pull us through now into just a closing section here. There's a couple of questions we like to ask as a bit of a tradition on the podcast.
Yeah, go for it.
What's one thing you've changed your mind about recently, and why?
I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation the heritage of IBM and where we've come from in technology. I like a lot of people, I would have thought, hey, the mainframe. Surely that's something. Again, I mentioned the War Games movie. That's surely something from kind of the 1980s. If you've paid for something today, other than just like handing over cash, if you've used your mobile phone, if you've had any kind of transaction with government, you've probably used a mainframe today. And actually, the mainframes now have kind of got AI infused into them, and so one of the things that we're all worried about is fraud, and how you reduce fraud. Well, that is an AI problem, right? Spotting the outliers. And so actually, so we've just released, or our technology friends in IBM have just released a new mainframe, and it's and the market for this and the demand for this is off the charts, because people need to be able to provide AI in the context of absolutely mission critical stuff like banking payments. So I thought that this was just a completely dead technology. We help clients move off mainframes as well, by the way, because not everybody needs this sort of technology all the time. But I came into IBM just thinking that was a complete dinosaur. Thought that was like a dying business, and I've been completely re-educated that this is a technology that is going to be with us for quite some time, and so that for me was a complete surprise in joining IBM.
What's one thing you've not changed your mind about, and a belief that you'd like to share to help others lead better lives?
Yeah, look, I think that there are, while we talk about AI and the benefits of AI, I think there are some fundamental skills and fundamental behaviors that are going to be persistent. So I think one of the most important things is resilience, and ensuring that we are resilient, that we're instilling that in our colleagues, in our families. I think that is the most important thing. We're at a time of profound change, and the change isn't going to be completely linear. And so we're going to need to roll with the punches. And again, if I think about some of the people that I've seen that have been most successful in their careers, most successful in their lives, many of them have had enormous knockbacks and have bounced back. So I think resilience is one of the most important human traits. And I think that is probably something that is going to become even more important in the years ahead.
Seems kind of ridiculous to ask you this question because you've given so much during the interview, but one piece of advice you'd like to leave the executives listening with when it comes to tackling this fast changing world of AI?
I think go play. Right? Get your hands on the tools. Get familiar with the kind of technology, the kind of tools, the enablement that exists, for your customers, for your colleagues, for your partners, and spend time then, with people that are, immersed in this, to envisage the possibilities. But yeah, go play.
Dave, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Really, I wish you continued success with the channel and the business more broadly. I think I think what you do is really important, and I look forward to continuing to be a listener and consumer of your content. So thanks for this.